Vice Chair, Clinton Foundation, Chelsea Clinton.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will begin our final close, as we have begun every session, this CGI, with a series of new commitment announcements. I'd like to invite to stage Joe Chioni of Massimo, Nancy Tausig of Save the Children, Steve Davis of PATH, and Leith Greenslade of Just Actions, and to acknowledge Minister Kasete Admasu, the Minister of Health of Ethiopia, who was with us earlier today. In Ethiopia, a lack of oxygen, an often overlooked but life-essential, life-saving medicine, contributes to an estimated 11,000 maternal deaths, 60,000 newborn deaths, and 30,000 child pneumonia deaths each year, every one of which could be prevented. Babies who are born preterm or who contract pneumonia early in life are particularly vulnerable, as are women and children in remote communities with little or no access to health services. United for Oxygen, a partnership of the organizations represented on stage today, the Minister of Health in Ethiopia, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Royal Philips, Grand Challenges Canada, and many others, will support the government of Ethiopia's roadmap to expand access to oxygen for women and children throughout the country. United for Oxygen will increase the availability of blood oxygen assessment and treatment protocols in health centers and hospitals, prioritize oxygen access in health plans and policies, train healthcare workers, and establish sustainable financing solutions for the long-term delivery of oxygen delivery systems. The partnership will implement health screening models for the prevention, detection, and treatment of oxygen deprivation, as well as train healthcare workers, specifically in maternity and pediatric wards, in accessing and using oxygen. Following an assessment impact, the partnership plans to address oxygen access in other countries with high levels of maternal and child deaths throughout sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, taking the important work of this commitment forward for years to come. Please give them a round of applause. And now I'd like to invite to stage Alistair Chang, Executive Director of Libraries Without Borders. Following 50 years of conflict between the government of Colombia and the FARC forces, something we heard President Santos speak so movingly about just a couple of evenings ago, a peace treaty was signed just 1 month past. But as many as 8,000 ex-combatants are still isolated in mountain regions and not yet re-engaged or reintegrated into communities. Rebuilding lives and communities in Colombia will take time the government is willing to invest and is grateful to have partners alongside those efforts. The Colombian government will begin to relocate former FARC members, mostly from poor rural communities, to temporary normalization zones starting this fall. And it's working with rural population partners to rebuild and prevent conflict from recurring. Libraries Without Borders is a leading NGO that works to create libraries in developing countries. And they are committing to build and deploy one of their signature idea boxes in each of the 20 locations designated for former combatants ready for demobilization and reintegration. The Ideas Box is literally a box, a 330 square foot portable multimedia center providing access to information, books, technology, and movies. It contains laptops and tablets, a library of old-fashioned paper books, as well as ebooks, and a built-in cinema. The Ideas Box can be transported to remote areas and made easily available to vulnerable populations and relocated as needs evolve. Libraries Without Borders will work locally with Colombia's Minister of Culture to identify and reach both FARC ex-combatants as well as civilians in the prioritized rural communities as determined by the government. A second phase of this 3-year commitment will bring Ideas Box to rural communities hard hit by the long conflict. After 1 year in the initial locations, the partnership will help to lead residents toward the establishment of permanent libraries. Residents will be engaged throughout the process to select the materials and programs that they most want to see. Through this program, people who have endured unimaginable trauma, who have been deprived of meaningful educational opportunities, hopefully will now receive better access to resources, training, and recover some of the hope that, as we heard from President Santos, Colombians have been denied for 3 generations. Please give Libraries Without Borders a round of applause. In 2010, a group of CGI members from the private, public, and nonprofit sectors embarked on a journey to the Democratic Republic of Congo. What they saw there convinced them that they needed to do more and that they could be most impactful if they worked together. The following year, CGI launched the DRC Action Network at our annual meeting. From a school for girls built by the Malika Foundation to an electronic medical record system created by the Lake Tanganyika Floating Health Clinic, CGI members have created 124 commitments to action that include the DRC in their scope, 23 of which have focused on the DRC exclusively. In a short while, we will be joined by Ben Affleck and Shushu Naim-Gabe, who will discuss their work creating opportunities for smallholder farmers and women through the Eastern Congo Initiative, which originated as a CGI commitment. But before they join us on stage, we're going to hear from our final commitment voice of the meeting. With growing international attention to sexual and gender-based violence in conflict areas like the DRC, a question that many of us have persistently asked is, how do we engage men and young men, boys, as partners in the resolution and future prevention? In 2013, Promundo made a CGI commitment that launched what they called the Men for Peace Initiative, a multi-partner international initiative designed to engage men as peace promoters and to raise awareness about the crucial role they must play in preventing gender-based violence. Promundo works with local NGOs such as Living Peace Institute to develop and implement community action plans that engage men to help combat violence against women, to promote gender equality, and to be role models for other men and boys in their communities. It is now my honor to introduce a story about Promundo's commitment and Benoit from the Living Peace Institute to share a bit of his experience as an agent of change in the DRC. Please turn your attention to the video screens. Thank you.
1997 jusqu'à aujourd'hui, il y a eu plus de 6 millions de morts. Il y a cette destruction du tissu social du Congo. Vous savez, la guerre crée beaucoup de chômage, un choc psychologique. Mais on ne parle pas. Il n'y a pas de psychologue, il n'y a pas de psychiatre. On n'a pas encore vraiment satisfaire les besoins du marché.
Hali yangu vile nilikuwa mkoamu huo uchue ile mambo, nilikuwa mtu mwenye
juu kubisahau na tunaishi mwa ile hali biko kutubu nguvu.
Alikale kulikuwaka violence ilikuwa najimanifeste pale, na wakati tulikuwa natumika pale ni boga ya zaidi sana. Tukonaka batu banatukuia, basi bakatwambia banaume bapite ngambo abo na banamuke ngambo abo.
Wakafikia na banatubaka, kwa wanamke kama 5 hivi. Nikaona tuka ni kawaida na waviku, nikaona ile dati inapita, kasema mimba. Batu wote wasivijue, juu watu wakayua ni haya. Nikaishi mwa ile prison.
Nikakuwa oblige kumfukuza mwanamke. Mwanamke akaenda kwabo, na njoo kwenye alienda kazalia ile mimba.
Ule mtoto ule mwenye wa kuviolence hakuwa niitikaka kumfanyisha devoir.
Ikanituma nikuwe mkali sana, donc sikukuwa na sens ya kusikia mtu.
Qu'est-ce qui pousse les rebelles ou les militaires à faire le sexe ou à violer? C'est une façon d'anéantir l'ennemi. Avant, il y avait vraiment beaucoup d'efforts pour aider la victime. Et c'est bien, il faut continuer. C'est bien. Mais vraiment, pour stopper la violence, il faut s'attaquer à la source. Et la source, c'est l'homme.
Sasa kitu kikubwa kenilianza nacho, maneno yenye nilikuwa naendaka zungumuza kule nje, nikaanza ishange na bibi kunyumba. Ile dialogue junjo ilikuwaka devoir kubwa balinipaka, ongea naye. Nikajisikia sasa tena nakamata fasi ndani ya maisha yangu.
Sasa nilianzaka jokipenda ule mtoto matuka violence. Nilianzaka ona samwa basi ni ndoto.
C'est comme si on était en train de se battre avec la culture. Et la culture a une force. Mais je pense que les choses sont en train d'être bien faites.
Bonjour, je suis Benoît, psychologue, j'habite au Congo Kinshasa. Je suis le directeur du projet Living Peace Institute. Dans notre pays, les 20 dernières années, des millions de vies humaines ont été perdues. Une femme sur 4 a été victime de violences sexuelles. Et presque tout le monde, moi y compris, a enduré une forme ou une autre traumatisme. La guerre a causé de la mort, des blessures, des viols et les déplacements forcés de nos familles. Et cela a marqué notre communauté. J'ai vu les effets du traumatisme compromettre la sécurité des hommes et des femmes, le bien-être, leur productivité et faire de la honte un sentiment durable. La honte et la méfiance sont des blessures invisibles que l'on peut difficilement reconnaître et donc résoudre. Parfois, les gens ont honte. Ils ont honte de ce que nous avons vécu. Nous avons vécu des choses douloureuses. La peine de la honte peut détruire les relations et peut mener à la violence, même entre ceux qui s'aiment. Quand Abi et Kialou, ce que vous avez vu dans le film ici, filles réunies, il n'y a pas eu de moment de joie que l'on entendait. Abi m'a dit, c'était insupportable d'apprendre ce qu'ils avaient fait à ma femme. Il a dit que c'était comme s'il était incapable d'agir et que les traumatismes les rendaient fous. Les femmes qui ont été violées sont souvent rejetées par les communautés, par les familles, par leurs maris, et cela intensifie la honte et l'isolation. Longtemps, après la fin du conflit, les effets restent avec nous. Comme un membre de la communauté congolaise, un survivant, et un psychologue, je me sentis obligé de faire quelque chose pour casser les cycles de violence et pour nous aider à guérir. Sans beaucoup de professionnels de santé mentale au Congo et sans soutien des hôpitaux et des communautés, notre mission n'était pas facile. Mais il fallait faire quelque chose. Ensemble, avec Promundo, avec Il Africa, j'ai décidé de fonder Living Peace Institute avec le but d'adresser ou d'aider notre souffrance collective et de guérir les blessures avec la parole. Du coup, avec l'aide des personnes référées par des chefs de communautés, par des autorités militaires et policières, nous avons lancé un programme de thérapie de groupe pour les hommes. Des fois, les hommes rejoignent le groupe aussi, mais nous sommes concentrés sur les hommes surtout parce qu'il faut les aider, il faut se focaliser sur eux pour qu'ils gèrent leurs émotions et trouver la puissance dans la paix et non pas dans la violence. Pour quelques hommes, c'était difficile de venir et de communiquer leurs sentiments. On leur a demandé de parler des problèmes dont ils n'avaient jamais parlé et ils ont été sujets des critiques des gens de la communauté qui ne comprenaient pas ni la méthodologie ni le but. Il a fallu créer la confiance, l'ouverture d'esprit et l'empathie. Et petit à petit, nous avons réduit et finalement éliminé la résistance. D'après mon expérience, travailler avec ces individus, je sais que cette peine est profonde et la guérison arrive lentement. Nous avons typiquement vu une réduction remarquable après 3 ou 4 mois de ces groupes de parole ou de ces réunions. Les hommes et les femmes apprennent à mieux communiquer, se voir comme des égaux et, plus important, comme des alliés dans ce processus. Et cependant, qu'elle se concentre sur la réparation des relations des familles et des partenaires, nous avons trouvé que le processus a également soulagé des tensions interethniques, mais aussi entre les civils et les militaires, et a diminué des tensions dans la communauté. Abi m'a dit que ces rencontres étaient difficiles au début, mais qu'il a trouvé le réconfort dans les histoires des autres. Kialou a dit que quand Abi s'est vraiment mis à participer et s'est ouvert à notre travail, il a commencé à lui parler avec plus d'émotion et à être plus attentif avec leurs enfants, et surtout avec l'enfant du viol. D'un lieu où ils puissent adresser ses origines ou les origines de violence, ils ont trouvé l'amour qu'ils avaient cru mort du traumatisme qu'ils avaient souffert. Abi et Kalou ne sont qu'un couple parmi plusieurs aidés par ces groupes de Living Peace. La reconnaissance, l'engagement et le soutien que nous avons eu des communautés et du gouvernement congolais nous permettent d'avancer et de continuer. Même s'il reste encore beaucoup de choses à faire et beaucoup de guérisons à faire, beaucoup de travail à venir, je sais que nous sommes sur la bonne voie. C'est un honneur de faire ce travail que je fais et c'est un honneur d'être ici et de partager avec vous notre petite expérience. Je vous remercie.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. Actor, filmmaker, and founder, Eastern Congo Initiative, Ben Affleck. Founding member, South Kivu Women's Media Association, Shushu Namagabe. And our moderator, co-founder, editor-in-chief, and CEO, Ventures Africa, Uzademe Iwela.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. All Okay, you guys, look. This is the last plenary of the CGI. This is quite literally my 20 minutes of fame, so we're going to do this right. Good afternoon, everybody. That's much better. I like that. All right. So we have a really interesting discussion for you guys here today. I'm here with an international media star, Shushu Namagabe, and Ben Affleck. We don't have much time, so let's get right into it. Shushu, I'm going to start with you, and I really want to ask you. So you've spent the last 6 years training about 80 women in journalism in Eastern Congo. And so I wanted you to talk to us about what you've been doing, the work that you've been doing, and essentially how you can work with NGOs, with government, with business to provide opportunities for women in your community.
Thank you very much. We founded the South Kivu Women's Media Association in 2003, and our aim was to promote women's rights by using media, because we thought that as a journalist, we were powerful with the media, with our microphone, and that's how we used it to make the voice of other women to be heard. And that's why we founded South Kivu Women's Media Association. But as there was no school of journalism in Congo, I'm a self-taught journalist, so we thought that we could train as a female, as a young journalist to become journalists. That's how we started working. And, women in Congo, despite all the problems that they are facing, you saw in the movie just now, they are strong women, they are brave women, they are resilient women, and they are doing a great job. And we think that media could do a big work to empower them, to make their work known, and that's how, with the help of ECI, Eastern Congo Initiative, we worked with women who are in farms. And really, I'd like to thank Ben Affleck. I met Ben in 2009, and it was when I was awarded by Vital Voices. He gave me the award. And I remember I gave him the invitation to come to Congo to see the situation of women. And 1 year, day by day, he was in my office. I told him, Ben, you are a man of words. In French, it's tu es un homme de parole. And really, thank you, Ben. And because of that trip, after that trip in 2010, he founded Eastern Congo Initiative.
So let me jump in here and ask you, Ben. So 2009, you meet Shushu. 2010, you founded Eastern Congo Initiative. Now we've seen a lot of celebrities come to Africa to do work. And I know that when you came, you decided to focus on something specific, right? You said, let's look at communities, let's look at agriculture, let's look at coffee. What brought you to that decision?
Well, there was, of course, some irony. In 2009, I was spending my time avoiding all the journalists I could in the United States and traveling to Eastern Congo to find these extraordinary journalists. I assure you, there's the women who work at AFEM, some of my friends in journalism here could learn a lot from them, and they're great, brave, and important work. Shushu, thank you very much for what you've done. It's extraordinary. My story is just that I was at a point in my life where I was feeling, even by Hollywood standards, sort of especially vacuous and meaningless, and like I was really, doing nothing with the good fortune that I had, doing nothing to give back, to put back, that sort of, moral incumbency to help those less fortunate weighed down on me. And I started looking around, and I came across a passage in a book I was reading about Sudan, actually, where they sort of mentioned in an offhand way, well, this conflict in Darfur has been terrible, and it's killed 250,000 people, although that's only a fraction of those who have died as a result of the wars in Congo. And I read the paper every day, and I consider myself at least moderately well-informed, and I had no idea that this kind of crisis was unfolding, without the world watching it. And the human cost of that, we've seen from gender-based violence to the lives that were lost to preventable disease and nutrition and a country whose basic infrastructure kind of came apart. And I wanted to approach this work from a really humble place. I didn't want to be the celebrity who says, like, why in the world would a celebrity be an expert on anything, really, other than being a celebrity? You know what I mean? You wouldn't necessarily think that's the guy you want to have come plant your coffee for you.
So how did you come to coffee? What brought you there?
What I did was I looked around Congo and I found in this war-torn, and it was in the midst of more tumults and rebellions sporadically place, there were extraordinary people doing incredible work who were determined to live, make a life, prosper, be happy, take care of their family. People just like Shushu and the people that they were reporting on. And I wondered, well, what really do I have to offer? And at first I thought it would be just sort of your standard pat, awareness raising idea. But what happened was I got exposed to remarkable people in community-based organizations. I saw that the most effective work, the most profound work was being done by the people who actually lived there, who had stake in the game, who lived in the neighborhood, who knew the players, who knew people in the militia and in the army, who knew, where women had been ostracized and isolated because of fistula and they were afraid to come down to go to the hospital, people who were running the local schools. And that, to me, and people like Shushu, who were breaking their own radio station and putting women's voices out there so that to reacculturate, a society to be more empathetic toward women and their stories. And, Congo, as it turned out, I didn't know, had been an agricultural monster in the 70s. If properly farmed, it's big enough and arable enough to feed a third of the world. But that farming infrastructure had been almost completely destroyed. It's sort of the equivalent of Florida losing 90% of its citrus crop or 90% of the corn crop in Ohio.
90% of the citrus crop, but which is kind of crazy to think about. But I guess in the past few years, you guys have worked with about 4,500 farmers, right?
Yeah, what we started doing was just realizing that there were people already there, farmers, smallholder farmers, who were farming and working very hard and still living barely on a couple of dollars a day, and that the only thing keeping them from selling it was that they hadn't quite reached this level of standard that the international market wanted, and they didn't have the capacity yet to organize businesses and to engage in international trade. And we saw a place for ourselves to step in there. Right. And we started working with farmers, and the first export was 40 tons in 2012, and today of cocoa, there's over 1,000 tons in 2016 that they've exported. It's nothing for 15 million chocolate bars. And we're doing the same in coffee, where Starbucks has stepped in and we brought in private sector partners like Starbucks and like Theo Chocolate and brought them together with these farmers whose capacity, we've tried to build and create these marriages where then we can walk away. This is self-sustaining and sufficient and can go on and doesn't have to be continuing aid.
I think we can clap for that. Let's clap for that. So you've been on the partnerships tip. And I think, Shushu, a lot of what you've done has been in partnership with ECI. Now, AFEM, I know, was one of the first institutions that partnered and received, I think, a grant from ECI to do the work that you're doing. So tell me about the importance of partnerships in your community for getting work done.
Thank you very much. I would like to add something. As a journalist, as I have already witnessed the impact of the work of Eastern Congo Initiative, because we made some interviews with women farmers. Before the coffee, the coffee farm, it wasn't an important activity in rural areas, mainly in Katana, Kalehe, Kabare, where Eastern Congo Initiative worked. But now, women can share their experience through our radio programs, our radio shows. And they said that it's really helped them to increase their income, because now they know that coffee is a good activity. Now they can build their families' income, they can feed their families, they can make their children studies from the income of coffee. So really it's a good good testimony from the farmers, the women farmers. And before they were working like only workforce, They didn't know that they could be powerful, they could be involved in all activities. But with the support of ECI, now they are powerful. They are now chief of the executive. Now they are owners, and they want really to be involved in all the process of the production.
So we're talking about people going from farming to being chief executives, and that's all through partnerships that have been created at the local level. So Ben, let me turn to you and talk to partnerships at the ECI level, right? You mentioned Starbucks. I think you have also been working with Theo Chocolate. Let's talk about these partnerships and what they mean for what you're doing.
Sure. I mean, the whole goal of what we're doing is we're really working with entrepreneurs in Congo, people starting their own businesses. And it's interesting, talk about gender, and Shushu mentioned the women. You know, it bears mentioning that one of the other things we're trying to do is help facilitate women's roles, because 80% of the farmers are women and they own 1% of the land. So, you know, there's still things like that we try to deal with and ameliorate. But one of the nice things is, you know, I've used the relationships I have and the good fortune I've had in life to get to meet some interesting and important and dynamic people, and reached out to them and said, look, here's an opportunity to do aid that is really not aid. It's not giving someone something and walking away, and then once they lose it, they're left wondering, will I get some more? Where do I make it for myself? Do I wait for aid to come? You know, it's really about creating a sense of pride and personal investment in your community as an entrepreneur, somebody who manufactures and sells something that has worth to other people. That we found is a really profound thing, and we've come across some really impressive, forward-thinking private sector partners. You know, here obviously Starbucks and Theo Chocolates. Theo, fastest growing chocolate company in the country, and they now, all of their chocolate bars has some Congolese coffee in it. And they've responded to this climate is actually perfect for growing coffee. It's where you can grow the Arabica coffee. I told you I wasn't a coffee expert, but I picked up a few lingo words along the way. And it's still prime for to be, you know, farmed much more widely than it is now, and that's why we started this Congo Farmer Trust partnership.
So talk to me about the Congo Farmer Trust. I think there's a big announcement that you want to make about the Congo Farmer Trust. So what's happening with that?
Well, basically what it is an initiative to take the model that we've used and demonstrated is successful and expand it. We want to raise the capacity from 1,000 tons of coffee to 10,000 in 5 years. It's a $12 million project. We've already got a lot of great partners, the Starkey folks and others to help, and as I said, our partners back home in terms of the buyers. And what we want to do is affect the lives of, you know, reach 25,000 smallholder farming families over the next 5 years, which is changing the lives of over 100,000 people. The farmers we've already worked with, you know, we've tripled the income of 5,000 coffee farmers in the last 2 years. You know, and over the 5 years, we really feel that this can be a real catalyst for the community as well, which is why we make other selected grants in areas like education and legal assistance, and so that services rise while salaries rise, so that they can able to support, find the support they need in these communities.
Right. So you guys, I hope you heard that. For 12 million, right? That's 100,000 people's lives you can change with $12 million. I think that's a bargain, right? But before we move on, I want to turn to Shushu, and I want to ask you, so, we've talked at a high level about lives, but you tell stories from folks on the ground. Can you tell us just a bit about what it means to change a life on the ground?
The change is a process. Change is a process, and it takes time. And we can see it on the ground. We can see it how women change from workforce to become leaders. They are already powerful because they know their rights. They know that they can use their voice. They know that they can work and benefit from their work. That is really a big change for them. And we make a link together with our radio programs and farmers, because we have a radio program which is called Wake Up Farmers. And women have to share experiences. They share what they are doing, and those who are in other provinces can hear that and can also want to do the same thing. And that change really, we can see it. In Swahili, we say it pole pole, it means little by little, but for us, it's really a big process. And I think now with ECI, we are starting a radio station for women. That was a dream. It was before it was a dream, but now it's becoming a reality because ECI is founding a firm to have our own radio station for women. And this radio station...
Hold on, I think you guys need to be a bit more generous with that applause. This is a radio station that's going on. Come on. All right, that's it. That's more like it. Thank you, people.
No, I think it's really important to emphasize that our philosophy has always been to go and ask questions, to go learn, to do this work humbly with respect. And that's why when I was getting ready to get into this work, I went around and interviewed with a lot of, smart, writers, survivors, activists, professors, people working on the ground in this field to get a sense of what was needed, because you were one of the people who I came and said, I just don't want to be none of these celebrity asshole philanthropists. Can you help me? And you gave me a long list of people not to be like. So
wow, okay.
I followed that. I tried to follow that advice. But it really is part of our ethos that, we go and when we work with AFEM or others, we say, tell us what you need, tell us how best you think it should be done, and tell us how you're going to implement it, and let us be helpful and support you. And, whether you hear about ECI again or not, I think the most important takeaway for me is that it's really effective to work with small groups, community-based organizations, people on the ground, people who are already there living that life, and it's made a huge, huge difference.
All right.
Also, I think I'd like really to complete that this radio station is a powerful tool for women because we were paying for airtime to make the women's voice to be heard. We were paying $50 for 30 minutes, but now they have all the time for them, and we share content, they express whatever they want, so really it's a powerful tool for them, and it's just starting, so it needs your support from everywhere to make it, to become a big tool for women. Thank you.
And I think we have in this room the people that can support these initiatives. So we've got 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to let you guys know, if you haven't, there are 5 chocolate bars I have up here. I'm not a big coffee fan, but I love chocolate. If you haven't had this chocolate, you should try it, because then you'll know exactly what these partnerships can really produce. I'm just gonna pull out a Sharpie, and I'm gonna ask both of you guys to sign my 5 chocolate bars. And the first 5 people to find me to ask about ECI, I'm gonna give you a chocolate bar. But you have to make a commitment. All right, so before we go, are there any final things that you want people to remember before we get off stage here about what the work you're doing is in the Eastern Congo?
Well, again, our work is about supporting the people who are there doing phenomenal work, identifying those folks. They're hard to know from afar who they are and what they're doing, and we want to do the work of identifying them and lifting them up. And I guess I just want to say that my life has been changed by the Congolese people themselves. I went to a place expecting, war-torn and savage and hiding and people lying on the ground with flies in their eyes, my mind full of all the images that I'd seen from Africa. And instead, I found people who are just still trying to run their business and trying to get their kids to school, and despite the shelling, you know what I mean? And we wanted to have a normal, rich, full, robust life that they could be proud of, and that we're so close to that. It takes so very little to, they didn't want someone to do it for them. They just wanted a chance to get up to the plate and do it. And the Congolese people are astonishing, and I assure you, if you ever get involved with any of them, you'll find it truly rewarding.
And Shushu, $12 million to change 25,000 lives. What do you have to say?
Yes, I think while I'm here in USA, I'll take this opportunity to complete my studies in journalism, and I think I'll have new skills and go back in Congo to train a lot of young female journalists. And I think with a large number will be powerful, even in rural areas. When we have many voices of women, will be strong enough to change things in Congo.
And you're also expecting your 4th child. So she does all this and has 3 other kids.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. And remember, Eastern Congo Initiative. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Chelsea Clinton.
So I hope that someone here will offer to bring Shushu's radio station online so that those of us here can listen to her as well. I was very struck when she spoke about how Wake Up Africa enables women to learn from one another in her country. I think clearly she has a lot to teach those of us here as well. So I hope that someone will take me up on that slavish plea to fund her ability to have an even broader audience. And I hope that all of us will go home and buy even more Theo chocolate. I couldn't, oh, you can applaud for Theo chocolate. And even more for Shushu. As clearly you all have likely noticed, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we begin each plenary and breakout session with a series of commitment announcements and progress updates. We thought now we would kind of take that model, but employ it in a slightly different fashion to enable 3 people who've been part of CGI University, CGI America, and CGI International to talk about the legacy of each of those programs and what they've meant to them in their work. So I'd like to introduce Donald Baird, the founder of Block Power, to talk about CGI University. Luis Alberto Moreno, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, to talk about CGI International. And Mayor Stephanie Miner, the mayor of Syracuse, to talk about CGI America. Thank you all so much. Donald.
Hi, I'm Donnell Baird, and I am a proud alum of the Clinton Global Initiative University. I'm the founder and CEO of Block Power, which is a technology startup based here in New York City. It's a platform for performing clean energy and energy efficiency retrofits in financially underserved American inner cities. When I was in graduate school, and Block Power was just the germ of an idea, I attended Clinton Global Initiative University. And because CGIU believed in the idea, they invested resources, they provided strategic advice, they provided guidance, they introduced me to awesome partners and mentors, and Block Power was able to become a reality. At CGIU, while we were there, we developed a plan to install energy efficiency and solar photovoltaic panels in New York City neighborhoods, including 1.2 megawatts of solar in New York City's poorest neighborhood, Brownsville, Brooklyn, where Mike Tyson grew up. Our partners on that project are the New York City Mayor's Office, the New York Governor's Office, Con Edison, which is the utility company here in New York, and several investment banks. And we met all of those folks through our participation in CGIU. It would not have been possible to imagine this kind of work or these kinds of projects without CGIU and its network. And I have a young son, I'm a new dad, and it just wouldn't be possible for me to imagine the kind of future and healthy climate and healthy inner cities that I want for him without this work. The Clinton Global Initiative launched CGIU in 2008 to extend the commitment to action model to the next generation of social innovators and entrepreneurs. CGIU knows that college students and young people, that we're the future leaders, right? And that we as young people are uniquely positioned to address the pressing challenges that are going to impact us the most. CGIU invests in identifying these leaders and helping us to find our voice. To date, CGIU has brought together over 8,700 students from 940 schools in more than 145 countries. The reach is extraordinary. And CGI students have made more than 6,250 commitments. And we've been awarded over $3 million to help implement those commitments. So let me tell you, yeah, great. So let me take a moment and tell you about just a few of the ideas that CGIU students have come up with and then turned into actionable social enterprises that are sustainable. First, Sarah Minkara, a blind Lebanese student at Wellesley, arrived at CGIU seeking to integrate people who were marginalized due to visual impairment. And she knew that the first step was going to be creating meaningful social bonds. She founded Empowerment Through Integration to help blind children in Lebanon and Nicaragua to learn how to take control of their lives and how to make valuable contributions to society. And through the organization's Camp Rafiki, blind children gather to participate in stimulating and fun and healthy, socially inclusive summer programs and activities. Second idea is Gavin Armstrong, who was a biomedical science graduate student at the University of Guelph in Ontario. And his idea was to develop and prototype a product called the Lucky Iron Fish, which is a safe and effective and efficient solution to solve iron deficiency around the globe. His product is a small cast iron fish that when placed in a pot, provides the recommended daily amount of iron and puts the iron into the meal that's being prepared. Gavin launched his social enterprise in Cambodia, where he employs disabled Cambodians in manufacturing and packaging jobs, and all of the materials that he uses are recyclable or they've already been recycled. It's pretty good. These are just a few of the commitments from CGIU, right? The list of initiatives and enterprises that have emerged from CGIU is pretty long, and it's pretty impressive, and it's pretty awesome. As we young people work to improve lives and create impact and build a better world, we've been learning through our own experience, right, my fellow students and I, that individual early stage efforts can have a huge impact and can actually echo and reverberate around the globe. So, in closing, I'd encourage all of you to stay in touch, stay tuned, because the next groundbreaking, world-changing innovation in healthcare or finance or energy might just be invented by a CGIU student.
Hello, I am Luis Alberto Moreno. I'm the president of the Inter-American Development Bank. I'm perhaps one of the almost 100 people who have had the pleasure of participating in every CGI annual meeting since its launch back in 2005. And I have seen firsthand, thank you. I've seen firsthand the growth of CGI, but more importantly, the incredible good it has inspired. For my organization, CGI has been a game changer. I've always believed in the importance of partnerships, but at CGI, we were inspired to expand the scale and the ambition of our work in entirely new ways. At CGI, we've generated 12 IDB-led commitments, collaborated on nearly 30 more, and advanced conversations ranging from education in Haiti to sports and development. IDB-led commitments alone leverage $875 million in resources, while the other commitments in which we have been involved have leveraged around $1.3 billion. But for us, CGI has been not just about money, it's been about ideas, it's been about innovation and effectiveness. So I'm thinking of an IDB commitment that is eliminating tropical diseases by integrating health into water and sanitation projects through a partnership with Sabine, the Global Network, and the Pan American Health Organization. And I also remember how we joined with Nature Conservancy and the FEMSA Foundation to protect critical watersheds that provide drinking water to 70 million people in over 20 Latin American cities. Or how we were able to help the FIA Foundation and Latin NCAP to improve automobile safety, thereby saving millions of lives. All of this happens because of President Clinton's vision. So I was thrilled to be part of CGI International. And I knew there was great work that we could do in Latin America, as well as in other parts of the world. And to me, it was clear that CGI could shine a spotlight on those efforts and help people to find additional partners. Although CGI has been fortunate to have a globally diverse member base, CGI International reached new communities of innovators through events in Asia, in Latin America, in the Middle East, and in Africa. These events inspired dozens of new commitments, mostly from participants who were experiencing the CGI model for the first time. For the IDB and for many other organizations in Latin America, CGI helped catalyze commitments in the areas of climate change, of health, of road safety, and in sports for development. So I'm particularly proud of an IDB commitment that led to 5 projects of integrated tropical diseases with better water and sanitation infrastructure. At CGI Asia in 2008, the Abbott Foundation and Direct Relief International partnered with the Afghan Institute of Learning in its efforts to improve the health and the lives of women and children in Afghanistan. And at the completion of the commitment in 2011, treatment had been provided for 94,793 new female patients. And at CGI Middle East and in Africa in 2015, the Near East Foundation committed to establish 3 physical spaces where Syrian refugees and vulnerable Lebanese and Jordanians can safely access financial services and receive training for income-generating activities. These spaces are building the economic self-reliance of over 2,000 people in Lebanon and in Jordan over the course of 2 years. So I could share many more examples. In all, the international meetings have generated over 152 commitments in 101 countries, impacting millions of lives. These commitments are being fulfilled in countries at all stages of development, across all sorts of cultural, religious, political, and linguistic barriers. They are eloquent proof that human empathy and resourcefulness exist in every corner of the planet. So in closing, President Clinton, Chelsea, thank you for making this such a special meeting. And thank you more importantly, this has always been a very important week in New York. There's many meetings, there's many conversations, but there's few places where you can turn ideas into action. And more importantly, thank you all, because you helped us become better at what we do. We will never forget CGI.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Miner, and it's my great privilege to be mayor of the great city of Syracuse, New York. Having participated in CGI America for the last, thank you, Syracuse. Having participated in CGI America in the last few years, I have seen firsthand the incredible work that comes out of these meetings. President Clinton launched CGI America in 2011, when the United States was still limping from the Great Recession. The nation had lost millions of jobs and had seen its unemployment rate double. Loans were virtually unattainable, the housing market was frozen, and the nation's infrastructure was suffering from continued neglect. But President Clinton knew that despite all the doom and gloom, The CGI community was already working on innovative projects and creating responses to the recession. And that, with the additional support of partnerships and CGI partners, would be the leaders in the recovery. And he was right. CGI America's focus on economic growth and recovery and its working group model resulted in some of CGI's most innovative and impactful commitments. Let me share with you some of the most extraordinary ones. In 2011, at the first CGI America meeting, the AFL-CIO, the American Federation of Teachers, North America's building trades unions, and their partners announced a bold plan to use pension capital to invest in infrastructure projects. Since launching this commitment, more than $12 billion has been invested in U.S. infrastructure projects. This has created at least 100,000 jobs and provided job training for nearly 1 million workers. Another commitment that has seen tremendous growth over the years focuses on training STEM teachers on unprecedented scale. In 2011, participants responded to President Obama's call for 100,000 STEM teachers in the State of the Union address. The initial group of 28 private sector and nonprofit organizations, now known as 100K in 10, has grown to over 280 organizations and has trained 40,000 STEM teachers and is on target to reach 100,000 teachers by 2021. More recently, as the U.S. economy has improved, CGI America participants began to focus on how their commitments to action could help support long-term competitiveness and increasing economic opportunity in the United States. In this spirit, I worked with CGI this past year to launch a commitment in the city of Syracuse to help my city deal with infrastructure challenges and to become more resilient. We are building a system to share information about the state of infrastructure in our city with local entrepreneurs that will enable them to make informed decisions about where they locate their businesses and where they expand. We believe that this will help them grow their businesses, increase community support for increased infrastructure investment. Ultimately, it is our goal to share this tool and information with cities and communities across the nation. And this is just sort of the work that CGI America catalyzes. The diverse group of organizations that were part of CGI America over the years came from every corner of the United States. They were large and small nonprofits, major corporations and startups, labor unions and academia, and public sector officials, including mayors like me. Together, we have made over 500 commitments that helped amplify what was already working and increased opportunity across the nation. And as a result, Syracuse, America, and the rest of the world are better places. Thank you, President Clinton.
This whole initiative is in the how business.
President Clinton has created a forum where we can come together and share our ideas and our innovations.
Commitments can become a powerful tool.
We're going to get water and sanitation to 50,000 people.
Called micro land ownership.
With GAP Incorporated.
One of the things that I'm particularly proud of are the commitments that emerged during the annual meeting.
We made our first commitment.
New STEM teachers.
The world leaders of the rich and the poor countries and everybody in between come to the United Nations every year in September. So what I thought we would try to do this year is to have a somewhat smaller version of what we do at the World Economic Forum, but that it would be focused very much on specific things all the participants could do.
When President Clinton was invited to speak at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he essentially defined our mission in a manner that we hadn't previously fully expected.
But the important thing about this meeting is that it is more than a photo opportunity. For all the participants who came here were told in advance that they would be asked to make a specific commitment to take action in the coming year.
The notion of, for corporations, that they would be asked to participate, to listen to government and NGOs and work in conjunction with them was still in a novel stage, but we had enough leaders of the space who were willing to participate.
I
actually marvel sometimes at how simple but profound the commitments model is. Because if you think about it, we really only have 3 criteria. It has to be new, specific, and measurable. But when you put it into action, it's actually quite profound because it means that somebody has to be doing something above and beyond what they're already doing. The president had foresight in a way that I don't think anyone could have anticipated. He knew he had the power to bring people together. He knew that there were a lot of people who were hungry to do something.
It's been said that no power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come. CGI was an idea whose time had come.
We can do the hard things, and we should concentrate on the hard things. That's the highest and best use of all of our talents. Let's bring them to bear against the things that are truly challenging, not the things that seem to be challenging or interesting or easy to complain about. The concept of it, the doing it, is far harder.
Six years ago, when we started the CGI meeting in New York, I wondered if it would prove to be a fool's errand. I mean, after all, who wants to come to New York at the opening of the United Nations where it takes an hour to drive a block? To a meeting where you can't come back unless you promise to do something and keep your promise.
He knew that he had touched a nerve and that we could potentially expand this very, very significantly. So the first thing he asked me to do was think about creating CGI University to take the concept of commitment making to the next generation of leaders. The second expansion effort was CGI International, essentially take the show on the road.
When countries work together around what unites us, we are all better for it.
In 2011, President Clinton turned to us and said, how quickly could we put together an event to focus on economic recovery and job creation and competitiveness in the United States? That was the birth of CGI America in Chicago in June of that year.
But 2 summers ago, the summer of 2014, Direct Relief, I think on September 15th, with the annual meeting starting just a few days later, called me and said, hey, Scarlett, we're going to personally fund an airlift. And at that time, it would be the largest medical donation airlift to address Ebola.
You are flying relief to our people. This will translate into the saving of lives.
It was actually pretty emotional and pretty exciting to see that happening in real time.
I think there's a reason that we work here and really thrive in this very kind of fast-paced environment where you're trying to make things happen, trying to make them happen well. You don't even really stop and think about like what the steps are that you need to make it happen. You get going.
City leaders are calling it a game changer. A brand new program is aiming to make buying a home a whole lot easier in the city of Detroit.
In the winter of 2015, Detroit Mayor Duggan came to us and said, there's a complex challenge in the housing market there. I think CGI would be uniquely suited to look at this issue.
And then laid out the trouble that they were having in Detroit with folks wanting to buy homes, the depressed market, lowering homes to where folks could not being able to secure the funding to be able to do the rehabbing of the homes, and this kind of downward spiral, and the determination that there had to be something. People just needed to get creative.
They were the ones that got the lenders to join Mike Duggan at the Clinton Global Initiative in Denver, and in their words, he locked them in a room for 2 days until they came up with this solution.
It's not really an exaggeration to say, this group, they weren't locked in a room, but you had regional bank heads, you had foundation folks, you had folks from the White House, from the governor's office in Michigan.
So they clearly saw that this was, a catalytic moment for them.
With this program, we're going to be able to make 1,000 mortgages that would not have been made before.
I don't think anyone could have predicted in 2005 that the experiment that President Clinton was trying would succeed as much as it has.
There are so many people passionate about so many different things, and you just have to sometimes continue just, doing what you can until you can really move the needle on certain issues, but just to never give up.
Something just worked between many different departments.
How am I the one who's helping this person make the better decision?
You get to work with these people who are interested in pulling off the same thing. And it's not just the folks who develop commitments or, put people on stage and programming. every other team.
It's the people who have benefited from the commitments around the world, the organizations that were part of this place, and that's the commitment makers, that's the speakers. We'll continue to think about this model as a successful and effective way to find solutions. That model is the legacy.
So I think that in a very real sense, he's changed the landscape through CGI. And in that way, I think we can say we can declare victory.
Every one of you is trying to compose a life in which hope and history rhyme.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vice Chair, Clinton Foundation, Chelsea Clinton.
Thank you. I hope after having watched the video, if there were any lingering questions, you now know why I'm so fiercely proud to be my father's daughter. And why I am so fiercely grateful to have been part of this remarkable community over the last 11 years. And I just really wanted to kind of use my last moment on this annual meeting stage to say thank you. Thank you to all of the commitment makers. Thank you to everyone who has believed in this model, even if at times that meant being locked in a room for 2 days, as you heard on the video. And just a tremendous, tremendous thank you to the remarkable people who have worked for and with CGI over the years. It was really so heartwarming and tear-inducing to hear the applause backstage every time a current CGI team member or CGI alum came on to the video screen. And I couldn't actually think of a better introduction for my father than to ask all of you to stand up and applaud for the CGI team, because when you applaud for him at the end, it will be largely for him, but they really deserve our gratitude, our applause, and our appreciation. So thank you all so much for thanking all of them. Because while it's quite clear none of us would be here without my father, I think it's also clear none of us would be here without all of them. So thank you for showing your gratitude in such a unmistakably collective sense. And it always is, and I never tire, and I am so deeply grateful every day to the man who now first and foremost sees himself as my children's grandfather, and also, yes, the founder of CGI. Please welcome my father, President Bill Clinton. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to begin by saying I've been backstage having a good time. And so let me acknowledge two hearty elected officials who stayed to the bitter end: the Prime Minister of New Zealand, John Key, and the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Timothy Harris. Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to thank my friend of many years now, Ben Affleck, whom I have known and watched commit random and intentional acts of kindness since before he was Ben Affleck. when he founded the Eastern Congo Initiative as a CGI commitment with Whitney Williams, who's also here, 7 years ago. I'm not sure he ever imagined that 7 years later he'd be here with Uzo Iweala, who's not only a great writer, but now is going to be a doctor, and Chuchu Namagabe. But we thank them all for what they have done. I think when Donnell Baird came to CGI University, he couldn't have imagined his life would have turned out the way it did. Luis Alberto Moreno has been my friend for more than 20 years, since he was Colombia's ambassador to the United States, and I've known Stephanie Miner a long time. I thank them for what they did and what they said. I'd like to begin with a series of thanks. First, this has been, I believe, a profound advance in the conduct and impact of modern philanthropy. But I think it's fair to say that none of us who were there at the beginning could have fully foreseen it. And I will explain a little bit the way we fell into it. But I also want to thank Bob Harrison, Ed Hughes, and all the CGI staff, present and past. And they are here, and we should all express our appreciation to them, because I can tell you, none of this would have happened. When we started, the commitment process was a little card, and you just filled it in. And then we figured out, we better figure out how to help people develop these commitments. Then we figured out we better determine how we can help them keep the commitments. So pretty soon, most people were involved in helping people commit and keep the commitments, while other people had to figure out how to get people in the door at the first place. I want to thank all the volunteers who've helped. Some of them who are here have been coming every year since 2005. I want to thank all of you who are members, who come here to learn and teach and act. You're the heart of this. And I want to thank the sponsors, whose generosity has made it possible for us to be here over the last 3 days and the last 11 years. Your support has made it possible for us to have a truly global and representative group of people to make these partnerships, including people doing amazing work all over the world who could not have come here on their own. If it hadn't been for the partnerships, we wouldn't have that. And I want to thank especially a lot of the people from small non-governmental groups in America and around the world who have come up to me or emailed me or called me in the last several weeks just to say how all of you involved in CGI have amplified their work. And I'm grateful for that. I thank you for your commitment to constant innovation and scalability, and for always trying to find a better way to solve a problem or seize an opportunity to touch or save even just one more life. I thank you, those of you here who stayed true to the promise of CGI to the very end by making commitments here today. We have 96 new commitments that will bring our grand total above 3,600 commitments that we have now counted as already improving more than 435 million lives in 180 countries. I have a list by category, but I won't bore you with it because it's endlessly interesting to me, but I'll send it to you if you want it. The people in this room represent business, labor, governments, multilateral organizations, big and small foundations and NGOs, and other civil society institutions. They are people here of both large and modest means who come together across oceans, borders, racial, ethnic, political, and religious divides. With diverse experiences and perspectives, united only by a common mindset, the belief that everyone has something to give and an obligation to give it, the belief that our actions really can make a difference, and that as 21st century citizens, we all have a moral obligation to at least get caught trying to do that. Years ago, I read a book which captures, I think, the central idea of what we should be doing in the 21st century. It was called Non-Zero by Robert Wright, and it referred to a term in game theory. A zero-sum game is the one we all like the best. It's a soccer match, a football game. In order for one person to win, someone else has to lose. And we're all programmed to think of those games. But the ones that work best in an interdependent world are the non-zero-sum games, where in order for you to win, others have to win too. This is the ultimate non-zero organization. It's been one of the great honors of my life. You are living proof that good people committed to creative cooperation have almost unlimited positive impact to help people today and give our kids better tomorrows. Now, I have spent the last 15 years of my life working to advance that idea. I think it's the only way we can make the most of a world full of limitless possibilities, but imperiled by too much inequality, too much instability and negative identity politics, and all the conflicts they have spawned, and the continuing power of denial and delay to block adequate responses through traditional channels to our most severe challenges, especially climate change. How did we get here? First of all, when I left the White House, I just set up an office in Harlem. And I was trying to be a good neighbor, so we began by trying to help the businesses in our area who, frankly, many of them didn't even have their inventory computerized. They never had enough money to conduct a customer survey. They were about to be put out of business, a lot of them, by the gentrification of the neighborhood, which on balance was good news. We were raising incomes, but Harlem is a unique culture in America, driven by the music, the churches, and the small businesses, including the street vendors. So we tried to get them help. The model we had was labor-intensive and expensive and represented something we learned to do, which is if you can't afford what you're doing and you want to help, find a cheaper way to do it. So we transitioned to a mentoring program run by Inc. magazine, and then subsequently got other people to help develop the capacity of those small businesses. The second thing that I did was to get involved in what was the first of many disasters I would be called upon to handle, the Gujarat earthquake in India. The then Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, was a friend of mine. I called him, I said, is there anything I can do to help? He said, we have the money and the ability to fix the big towns and cities. We can't fix the small places. We don't have the capacity. I want you to come in and raise the money from the Indian American community to rebuild schools and hospitals and homes and help us begin again. So we did, and out of that came a new group, the American India Foundation, which is still going strong today, still in the most organized way that it ever existed, mobilized the enormous wealth and level of education and skill of the Indian American community to help their homeland. Then came 9/11. And I wanted to do something. And that something turned out to be joining with my opponent in the 1996 presidential race, Senator Bob Dole, and a really neat man who sadly passed away a few years ago, Andy McKelvey, and his company monster.com. And we raised more than $100 million for something called the Families of Freedom Fund to guarantee as much support as we could do to pay for college educations for the children and spouses of all people killed or disabled on 9/11, whether or not they were American citizens. And it was a good thing. And we're still doing it. And believe it or not, because of I am one of the tragedies, our fund is, of the enormous inflation in college costs. And the good news that even more people took advantage of it than we dreamed would. So I still, when all this is over, got to go figure out how to get them some more money. That's a good news story. It's endured for 15 years. It is going to be helping children who were in their mother's womb on that terrible day. So then the next year, the foundation really got going when Nelson Mandela and I closed the International AIDS Conference in Barcelona. At the time, we were co-chairman of a group called the International AIDS Trust. It was really just a bunch of has-beens, people that used to be in office, who went around rattling a tin cup, begging people to give money for AIDS. It's almost impossible to believe. 2002 wasn't that long ago. There were still, the dominant theory in the world was there was not enough money to keep poor people with AIDS alive. So we should spend all of our resources trying to keep people from getting HIV infected because it is 100% preventable. There was no global fund on AIDS, TB, and malaria. There was no American PEPFAR program. There were no big pots of money. Mandela and I believed that poor people should be treated. And after the AIDS conference was over, the then Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Denzel Douglas, who was a medical doctor and in charge of the AIDS effort in his part of the Caribbean, came up to me and he said, you know, we're not like a lot of places in the world. We have no stigma problem. There's not a problem here. We have no discrimination problem. Our problem is money and organization. And I said, well, Denzel, what do you want me to do about it? He said, I want you to fix it. And without even thinking, I said, okay. I did not have a clue. So I called our magaziner who'd worked with me on healthcare issues when I was president and on e-commerce. And we discovered that the only place in the Caribbean giving medicine was the Bahamas, the wealthiest country, and they were then paying $3,500 a year for medicine you could buy in India for $500. The international market was so disorganized that they went through 2 agents who ripped them off to a fare-thee-well. So because I had good relations with India, we called up and they cut the price. They just mailed the medicine for $500. So I thought, wait. So I thought, fool that I was, I thought this was going to be easy. I mean, we've just increased by 6-fold the number of people that can be treated. The rest of the money was needed for the treatment cost. And we did that in the first 4 days we were up and running. What a walk in the park this is going to be. Well, it turned out to be more complicated than that. But there was an insight there. At the time, the AIDS market, there were only 200,000 people anywhere in the developing world on medicine. Almost all of them in Brazil and Thailand, where they had their own pharmaceutical manufacturers and therefore bargaining power to get affordable medicine. And the business model was crazy. You had a global epidemic, and we were selling life-saving medicine like you would sell watches in a local jewelry store. High profit margin, low volume, uncertain payment business. So we essentially convinced them to try a low profit margin, enormous volume, certain payment business. And we had to go around and ask governments to help us. The first two were Ireland and Canada. Later, the Scandinavian countries came along. Later, the United Kingdom became our biggest donor, along with the Gates Foundation, then the Elton John Foundation, lots of others. But the basic model drove down the price of AIDS medicine ultimately by 90%. And then in the years ahead, it did the same thing for malaria medicine, for tuberculosis, for lab and testing equipment, for vaccines, for implantable contraceptives, for drugs to prevent the transmission of the virus from pregnant mothers to their children, and lots of other things. And Chelsea's personal favorite, for oral rehydration therapy and zinc, which now for 50 cents can prevent a child from dying from diarrhea. 80% of the people who die from waterborne diseases every year are younger than 5 years old. But it all started by just sort of falling into a conversation. We spent the next year or two working on that. And then in the years to come, we used the model to get a 90% reduction in calories going to kids in school from soft drinks. We used the model to attack climate change, plant millions of trees and start innovative reforestation programs. And we always had partnerships. Now, then Doug Band, who's here, said, you know, we ought to have a meeting in New York when the UN opens, because they go to Davos every year and it's fun, you can ski and everything, but we could get more interesting people here. I said, yeah. And everybody would have the exquisite joy of driving in New York City during the opening of the UN. And then I did a probably impulsive thing. I said, I'll try this, but I had learned by then that partnerships only work. I realized I'd been working hard. It looked like we'd done a lot of things. I didn't do anything by myself, nothing. If it hadn't been for the partners, nothing that had happened would have worked. So I said, let's try it, but say everybody who comes has to actually make a commitment to do something to make the world a better place. We won't say there's a minimum dollar amount. We won't say there's a minimum time amount, but they got to do something. And I thought, we're about to have a meeting and nobody will come. I mean, who ever heard of paying a membership fee to be asked to spend more money or spend more time? And it turned out, as you are the living evidence, that there was this profound hunger to be given a chance to do something that could have a real impact. That people who had been unusually fortunate were more than willing to invest their money. They just didn't want to be taken for a ride. They wanted to know how they could do something that would have a real impact. And I found person after person after person who turned out to be already doing things that were amazing. So that's how CGI started. And then even the people who started, I think, were surprised at how they wound up. Procter & Gamble had this little water purification packet that then cost about 10 cents. I think it costs a nickel today. That provides clean water to a family of 5 for a day or two. And they didn't know quite how to distribute it to people who needed it the most, that is, places without access to clean water, most of them very remote. So they found partners. This year they distributed their 10 billionth packet of clean water. And then we had people who were doing things they didn't know what they could do. My friends Bill and Tanny Austin from Starkey, for example, we're giving about 50,000 people the gift of free hearing every year. And I said, oh, you can do better than that. So he committed to do 100. I think they beat 200,000 this year. It's just amazing. And my point is, I'd like to say that we knew this was all going to come out this way. We didn't have a clue. You did it. But we did learn that creative cooperation works. We applied this model at CGI to the earthquake at Haiti. I'd been working there since before the earthquake for the United Nations. And we were raising money and trying to increase investment and all that. And then the earthquake happens, and overnight they lose 2/3 of their GDP. So Dennis O'Brien, whom many of you know, started this Haiti working group. Then people that had never been involved in Haiti started coming to the meetings, got excited. The place kind of gets under your skin. And now they've committed more than $450 million worth of investments in education and health care. This is in a country of 10 million people, 11 million, where the per capita income of 70% is under $2. There's the Mabubanis back there from Alabama. What do they care about Haiti? A lot now. And over, people did things like this. Now they've created thousands of jobs, rebuilt all these schools, put solar power and given electricity to people who never had it before. And though this is the last CGI, they're going to create an independent network, organization of the Haiti Action Network, so they can spend the last $150 million in commitment. And believe me, they'll make sure everybody that's committed comes up with the investment. Because it's better than sitting by and complaining. And because they made a real difference. In 2014, we decided to try to evaluate what you had all done, what it amounted to. And we did a real in-depth drill, including finding 6% of our commitments that had failed. And we didn't do what most people did. We actually publicized it. We said, this 6% failed, and it appears to us that it failed for this reason. And people in the philanthropy space thought that was a really good idea. And maybe one reason that all three of them have rated our foundation with the highest ratings. Nobody else goes around and says, here's where we tried and it didn't work out. Here's what we learned, and we're going to learn from it and do better. But what we did learn is that when we started the first CGI, 65% of your commitments reflected what I was trying to do, which is to get people to make the kind of partnerships that I had to make to do the work the rest of our foundation was doing. Today, more than 90% of the commitments are partnerships. And the partnerships were more likely to succeed and actually, on average, exceeded the stated goals that they embraced when they made the commitment. Turns out the model works. So I think you ought to be pretty tickled. But I think you ought to be resolved to have the same mindset I did when we started this thing. This is all that does work in the modern world. People may tell you you're making incremental change, but look back after 11 years and see what the aggregate is. There's nothing incremental about helping 435 million people in 180 countries. And now this is a time when this sort of talk is not in fashion all over the world, right? It's kind of a crazy time. On my mother's side, I'm Irish. We are celebrating this year the 100th anniversary of the Irish Revolution. And New York being the home of the largest Irish diaspora on earth, we celebrate it every 3 or 4 days this year. And a lot of you know the Irish are laughing because they know I'm telling the truth, right? So I've been to a lot of these celebrations because of my involvement with the Irish peace process in Northern Ireland. And I sort of went back and reread all the major books about the Irish Revolution in 1916. It's an interesting thing. A year before women got to vote in the United States, the Irish issued a Declaration of Independence with 486 words. Women are mentioned 3 times, including in the first phrase, saying we're going to create an equal society. Equal between men and women and equal for people without regard to their religion. We're going to be open to all. Now, we all know it didn't quite work out that way, right? So William Butler Yeats wrote 2 great poems about it. One was a beautiful, more traditional narrative poem called Easter 1916, in which he tried to make sense of the cruelty and violence surrounding the high hopes of that Declaration of Independence. On Easter 1916, there were 485 bodies in the streets of Dublin, one fewer than the words in the Declaration of Independence. In that poem, he had a line which applies to much we see today around the world. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. You see that everywhere in evidence. The crash had a very long tail. The people with money made theirs back before average people got a pay raise, so inequality increased. There are episodes of terror in France, the United States, and elsewhere. There is great disorientation in the face of rapid social changes, increasing immigration and diversity, and the largest refugee crisis since World War II. So everywhere today, there is a temptation to say to everything I just told you, no, you're wrong. Life is a zero-sum game, and I'm losing. You're wrong. Our differences matter more than our common humanity. To hell with the findings of the Human Genome Project that we're all 99.5% the same. No. Choose resentment over reconciliation. Choose anger over answers. Choose denial over empowerment. And yes, choose walls over bridges. These are not the right choices. The choices you have made here for 11 years are the right choices. So, what I want to say is, don't be disheartened, don't be deterred, or in the wonderful words of my tradition, do not grow weary in doing good. Deal with the headlines, but never forget the trend lines. The trend lines are better than the headlines. Good news about what's going right in the world is a hard sell today, but look at the trend lines. More than 1 billion people have been lifted out of extreme poverty since 1990. We have dramatically reduced the number of people dying of tuberculosis and malaria on all continents. Infant mortality is going down. The gender gap in global primary school enrollment has virtually been eliminated. While there is heartbreaking and lethal terrorist violence, don't forget to celebrate that 5 out of 6 people on Earth now live in regions that are free of armed conflict. Monday night, among our honorees was President Santos of Colombia, whose country has achieved a ceasefire after more than half a century of violence, and written a peace agreement that he is now presenting to the people of Colombia to decide whether to embrace. We had President Sirisena of Sri Lanka with us this week. His country has not returned to violence in the 7 years since its bloody violence between the majority Sinhalese Buddhist and the minority Hindu Tamils ceased. You had the mayor of Srebrenica, who survived the massacre 21 years ago that claimed the life of his father, his brother, and all of his male classmates, to come here in what many of you told me was the most moving plenary session you have seen with the Prime Minister of Serbia, to say that he figured he had survived by accident and he was duty-bound to stop it from ever happening again. None of this is to minimize the untold suffering of millions of innocents in Syria. It is to indicate what we should do about it. We should do what Frank Juster and Ahmed Khan are doing, trying to give us honest, clean, safe camps for people to live in who hope to be able to go home. You should do what Elias Bousab did, giving up a wonderful job at the American University of Dubai and a very nice life that I know he enjoyed because we had so many dinners together, to go home to be mayor of the little town of Lebanon he came from and the education minister of a country that now has 250,000 Lebanese children in school, 250,000 migrant children in school, and another 200,000 migrant children he is determined to put in school by the end of next year. That's what you should do. None of this could have happened without the belief that progress is possible. CGI is about building a culture of possibility. There will never be a time, if you live to be 300 years old, that there will be no problems on earth. The only thing you get to do is get up every morning and decide what you're going to do about it. And so here's my last thought. The title of this plenary is Imagine All the People. It probably isn't surprising for a man my age, but my birthday period here has virtually been haunted by the Beatles. When I turned 64, my best present was I got off the golf course with Rolando Gonzalez Munster and the phone rang and Paul McCartney was singing to me, "Will you still love me when I'm 64?" So that was Hillary's best present. I think the best one she ever gave me. So this week, we honor the global citizens, and John Bon Jovi sings Help. Help me if you can. That's what CGI is about. At my birthday party, he said, "Do you want me to sing American Pie?" I said, "Nope. I love it. I want you to sing Here Comes the Sun. And I want you to sing it to yourself." So now we have maybe John Lennon's greatest song, Imagine. And by pure accident, I've been thinking about it a lot lately, because that is the song that all the crowd sang with the children's choir more than a decade ago when Shimon Peres celebrated his 80th birthday in Israel. Shimon Peres is well over 90 now, a faithful CGI member fighting for his life after a stroke. He celebrated his 80th birthday with me and his old adversary, Ariel Sharon. Hard to imagine in the world of bloodlust politics today, but Shimon Peres sat his entire birthday celebration with a man who had always been his political enemy, but his personal friend. And he believed that if you could imagine a peaceful, harmonious reconciled future in the Middle East between Palestinians and Israelis and all of their neighbors, it could be achieved. And he spent a lifetime writing about it, speaking about it, trying to trigger other people's imagination. Tear down the walls in your mind and imagine. So here's what I want you to think about. A lot of you have heard me say this, but I don't think I'd ever become president or been able to do this if I hadn't been among the last generation of Americans born without a television, into a family of modest means that couldn't afford vacations and found all of its joy in life in conversations over meals, telling and listening to stories about ordinary people. So here's what this 15 years means to me. I will never forget going to Gujarat after the earthquake and going into a makeshift hospital to visit the victims. I shook hands with everybody in that hospital except one, a man who was way off in the corner with his wife, whose face was literally torn off. And I could tell they were embarrassed and didn't want me to come. But I couldn't stop looking at him. I was looking for him in. His eyes were all you could really see. All of his features were gone, except his lips were gone, his nose was gone, his cheeks were gone. And he knew I was looking at him. And finally, as I was walking out of the room, he waved his hand to me. And I realized he hadn't lost his face at all. I had lost the eyes to see. How many times have you lost the eyes to see? That's what this 15 years is to me. When I went to help on Katrina with the first President Bush, I went to this African American housing project that had been financed by a woman who died at nearly 100 a couple of years ago, Dorothy Hyde, who was a very close friend of Hillary's and mine. These people had just paid off their 30-year mortgages, and they all lost their houses, and they didn't know whether their insurance would cover the damage, depending on whether the insurance company counted it as a flood or a storm. And the spokesperson for the people was a beautiful woman still in her 30s, powerfully articulate, except she was in a wheelchair having lost both legs below the knee from type 2 diabetes because of America's epidemic of obesity and diabetes. And that's when I decided we had to do something about it. When I went to Cambodia the first time and we were helping all these kids to stay alive who were born with HIV, I held a little boy in my arms who was 9 months old. Both his parents were already dead from AIDS. There he was in this orphanage. His name was Basil. He's 11 today, healthy, happy. And one of my very favorite pictures is him holding Chelsea's hand and walking along. He thinks he's part of her family because he knows he lived because people like you helped provide the infrastructure to give the medicine to give that kid another chance. That's way better than all the statistics. I think of a boy named Jean-Pierre who was a little Haitian boy who was 5 and his sister was 9 when their parents died. They were living in a mud hut without much more living space than the top of this table. And their neighbors built them a better house out behind it. And when he came there, he said, we came there, and he was fine then. He was living, he was about 11 years old, but he was still just in the 3rd grade because he'd missed so much school. And he was still badly stunted. And he said, I have to keep going until I get out of high school because I want to be a doctor so I can keep other children from getting sick like I did. People like that boy are everywhere. They're in Dikembe Mutombo's Congo, which is why Ben Affleck's there. They deserve their chance. I think of the Haitian artisan I met after the earthquake when I went down there, still the UN envoy, and I told everybody to stop. We were going to buy something from the artisans on the street that sell their art. Usually there are hundreds of them. On this day, a week after the earthquake, there were only 8. And a guy said, "You have to come buy something from me. You came here in 2002 and bought something from me." So I told everybody, I said, everybody's going to buy something, and today we don't bargain over the price. They won't be insulted today. I said, "I can't believe you're here." He said, "Why?" He said, "I lost everything. My wife and my kids were killed." This is less than a week later. And I said, "And you're here?" He said, "Yes. How else can I honor them and what they meant to me? We're a family here. They all know what I lost. So if I'm here, they have no excuse not to be. We have to begin again." People like that are worth fighting for. I'll always remember the newborn baby in the Indonesian camp after the tsunami being held by a woman who lost her own children and saying that this is the newest born baby in the camp. I could name him. And I said, "Do you have a word that means new beginning?" And they talked among each other in their language, and she came back to me, the interpreter. "Yes, lucky for you, in our language, Dawn is a boy's name, not a girl's. We will name this boy Dawn, and he will always symbolize our new beginning." And there was that woman smiling through her tears, holding that little baby boy. I remember when we went to Sri Lanka after the tsunami, going to a meeting. I couldn't believe this. This was before the peace agreement that had Buddhists, Hindus, the minority Muslim group, and we were all meeting in the schoolyard of a school run by Catholic nuns. And I thought to myself, why in God's name do we have to have a disaster to behave this way? I remember when the Clinton's Youth Enterprise Partnership took me to Peru, and I met Peruvian Incan women, who were putting on their little backpacks with their consumer goods, going to the poorest villages in the remote Andes, striding off on foot, full of pride, because for the first time in their lives, they were earning a cash income that would enable their children to go to school. I remember being in the Malawian community that was part of the 2.5 million trees we planted, and they all got carbon credits. Now imagine if this happened in your neighborhood, wherever you live. In Malawi, the per capita income is less than $1 a day. So all these people showed up. They didn't know who I was. They just knew I was some old gray-haired guy that was trying to help them make a living, and they were going to get money out of planting these trees. So the first thing that impressed me was they planted trees that would grow in a hurry so they could have wooden houses, because they lived in the hottest part of Malawi and they didn't want to be in mud and bricks. The second thing was the village voted unanimously to take their carbon credits and give 45% of their money to their neighbors, so their neighbors could also be part of this program. How many places do you know that are 10 times, 20 times, 100 times more prosperous that would never do that? That's what I imagine the world looking like. I remember the kids in the Wings to Fly program in Kenya. They picked 10 of these 5,000 kids that were in terrible circumstances, that have a 98% high school graduation rate and a 94% college going rate. One of them was a boy that described how before he got in the program, he intentionally often committed some minor crime just so he could spend the night in jail to put food in his belly and have a roof over his head. The area was about 85% Christian, about 15% Muslim. I remember the Muslim girl that was first woman in her family ever to finish high school, and the Christian boys high-fiving her. They thought what they had in common was more important than their differences. I remember the orphan child, Zaytu, who at 17 had already been an orphan since she was 11 when she was left to raise her two children, her two siblings. And she joined Ubuntu, one of our CGI partners. It's a word that most of you know means I am because you are. She refused to be a victim, and when she got her degree, instead of being satisfied with raising her two younger siblings, she took 10 more girls under her wing to make sure that they could grow up as she had done. I said this the other day, but I remember going to John Bon Jovi's restaurant, Soul Kitchen, and watching where nobody pays except what they think they owe, and the poor don't pay, but they have to clean up. It's the only place in America I could imagine a millionaire, a middle-class business person, a working-class person sitting every day, this happens, and they're eating with homeless people, or people that are just barely not homeless but don't have enough money to feed themselves, and wondering what would happen if we all did that. I bet we wouldn't have a homeless problem very long in the United States. And I will never forget our friends from Bosnia. Thank you, Mayor Durakovic. Thank you for still being here. Thank you, Edvija Ibrahimovic, who I have seen many times now, as she is the constant spokesperson for the Srebrenica survivors. And I said, do you do this because you're eloquent? She said, no, I speak English better than everybody else. These people have decided not to be angry, to search for answers over anger, to search for reconciliation over resentment. All of you were moved by that. And I will never forget Edvija introducing Nadia Murad, the young Yazidi woman who had been not only deprived of her family, but sold into sexual bondage, who escaped and is now trying to lead her own movement to liberate women and girls. And she is trying so hard the other night to speak English, and those words were just like staccato blows from a sledgehammer beating on our heart. But I can imagine her as a happy, free person. Just a couple more. I remember the smiling face of Ben Gupta, who worked for Hillary when he died after going out with his girlfriend, drinking 4 beers, and he was told, here, pop this OxyContin, it'll give you a buzz. And he never woke up. He was gifted and graceful, and his grandfather, died with his boots on at 94, still a village doctor in his home village in India. And his father came to America and made good and said, you have to make my son's life meaningful. Take this money and figure out what we can do. That's why we now have affordable naloxone available in injection form for providers all over America. That's why a little company called Adapt made nasal spray naloxone and then is making it available 50,000 dosages for free, including one in every high school in America. Because his son and all of us who knew him will never forget the smile on his face. And this morning I saw an article about the mall in Kenya that was attacked by terrorists 3 years ago this week. You remember? And it's open and they're celebrating. One of the people who died in that mall was a woman who worked for us, for the Clinton Health Access Initiative, Ethiopia, a Dutch nurse. In all these years, the Clinton Foundation has only lost 2 people in the line of service. Both of them were Dutch nurses. Ethiopia Foods went home, back to Harvard, got an advanced degree in public health, was running one of our programs in Mozambique. Not long before she died, just a few weeks before she died, I was there and I was taking a picture of all the people who worked with us. She went through the photo line and she was luminous because she was already very pregnant. She went to Nairobi because it was the best place to have a baby. And when she died in a hail of bullets with her partner, she was 8.5 months pregnant. But remember, 3.5 years later, the mall is open, life goes on. You won, they lost. And her work is still a testament to a life honorably well lived and giving to others. And you know, one of the things that's, at least it's an ambivalent gift, is the longer you live, the more people you cared about who aren't around anymore. But you carry them around with you. I thought this morning about the great Irish poet Seamus Heaney, who was a great friend of mine, who wrote a wonderful poem called The Cure at Troy, with a line that said, "History says don't hope on this side of the grave, but once in a lifetime, the long far tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme." That's what you've done here. For 12 CGIs, that's what you've done. You have validated hope and possibilities. This year, Muhammad Ali died. We became friends long after his boxing career. But somehow he decided he wanted me to come speak at his service. So I said his life was a life in 2 parts. And the first part, he used his unique gifts as an athlete better than anyone ever had. In the second part, he was imprisoned by Parkinson's longer than Nelson Mandela was kept in jail. And he just had the same gifts all the rest of us did. He just used them better. When he was 22 years old, Ali wrote an essay in Sports Illustrated. He was about to fight a man named Sonny Liston. A lot of people thought he couldn't beat him. So he writes, at 22, still a poor boy from Louisville, living in that pink house you all saw on television. He said, people ask me all the time, what are you going to do if you don't beat Liston? I said, well, I think I will beat him. But if I don't, it's not the end of the world. The sun will come up in the morning. The flowers will bloom in the spring. There'll be something to do. No matter how bad his Parkinson's got, he never gave up being the author of his own life. The most enduring lesson I ever got from Nelson Mandela was that he was finally able to give up his hatred and embrace his adversaries when he realized that they had taken away from him the freedom not to be physically and emotionally violated. They had taken away from him the right to see his children grow up. They had taken away from him the possibility of preserving his marriage. He said, I realized they could take everything, even my life, except my mind and my heart. Those things I decided not to give away. And he smiled and looked at me and he said, neither should you. So I say to you, You have to keep this alive. You have to keep the spirit alive. You have to keep the work alive. You have to believe in possibility. You have to cultivate a culture of possibility. You have to know we can do more together than we can apart. You have to know that if you're prepared to pay the price of time, all these little things some people may say are incremental turn out to be a great big mountain. And when it's all said and done, the least even your adversaries will have to say is, you got caught trying. I say that. Don't ever give your mind and heart away. Don't give up on what brought you here. You have done something good and noble and worthy. And it is all just beginning. I believe the next 30 years can be the time of greatest discovery and possibility and creativity the world has ever known. Everyone in this audience under 30 years old has the chance to live to be 100 without the threat of Alzheimer's or other dementia. But only if we embrace our common humanity over our interesting differences and get up tomorrow knowing that just if we get caught trying and we do it with somebody else, chances are it'll work out better than it ever dreamed. CGI worked out better than I ever dreamed. Thanks to you. God bless you.